The deafening boom of amplifiers and the screeching wail of electric guitars reverberated through the interior of the human spacecraft. The heavy metal band was in the middle of an intense jam session, with the drummer pounding out a thunderous rhythm and the bassist's fingers flying up and down the fretboard. The vocalist gripped the microphone stand as he unleashed growls and screams that would surely shred his vocal cords if he kept it up much longer. Aboard the nearby Vuzerian vessel, the meek humanoid aliens covered their ear holes in sheer agony. The thunderous music invading their sensitive hearing was unlike anything they had encountered before in their journey across the galaxies. "Make it stop! Please make it stop!" First Officer Xylux cried out. Even the deepest corners of their ship offered no escape from the onslaught of sound. He felt like his eardrums might start bleeding at any moment. The Vuzarians were unaccustomed to the loud, boisterous nature of human forms of expression. Even human speech seemed explosively loud in volume and pitch to their delicate hearing. Vuzerian voices were rarely raised above a gentle whisper on their planet where sound carried swiftly on the winds. Yelling or shouting was considered terribly rude, but everything about the humans seemed exaggerated and overstimulating. Their music pulsed with a primal intensity, all growling, distorted guitars, heart-stopping drums, and vocals that sounded like savage battle cries. The very foundations of the Vuzerian ship vibrated from the relentless bass. On the human vessel, the band remained oblivious to the distress they were causing. The music was so loud their ears were numb to any outside input. They were lost in their own little world, pouring their souls into the cathartic performance. The lead guitarist thrashed his long hair around as he leaned back and unleashed a blistering solo, the notes screaming out of the stacks of amplifiers. He added plenty of feedback and distortion effects, trying to recreate the glorious controlled chaos of early heavy metal bands like Black Sabbath. Finally, the song crashed to its climax in a wall of deafening sound. The drummer beat the snare like it had mortally offended him. The bassist's fingers were raw and throbbing. The vocalist doubled over, grasping his tortured throat. They all felt euphoric, having left every last ounce of energy on the altar of metal. Little did they know, they had also left the sensitive Vuzarians traumatized, huddled in their ship, desperately waiting for the audio nightmare to end. The humans remained oblivious until repeated signals finally got their attention. Diplomat Telm shook as he attempted to send yet another pleading message to the human spacecraft. "Please, you must cease your agonizing music at once. We cannot withstand such intense sensory assault." But his desperate cries were barely audible over the deafening blast of drums and distorted guitars still raging from the human ship. Telm's ear canals throbbed as if they might start bleeding at any moment. The rest of the Vuzerian crew lay collapsed on the floor, tendrils covering their ear holes in a futile attempt to block out the sound. This was a first contact gone horribly wrong. The Vuzerians had such high hopes when they picked up the human vessel's signal, excited to meet the exotic new species. Now their sensitive hearing was under siege by the sheer intensity of human musical expression. Back on the human ship, the heavy metal band finally wrapped up their eardrum-shattering set. The musicians were exhausted but exhilarated, having poured every last drop of energy into their performance. Their ears rang from prolonged exposure to amplified distortion. "Great jam, dudes," the guitarist said, his voice sounding muffled. "Let's take 5. The drummer massaged his aching wrists and wiped the sweat from his brow. The vocalist guzzled water to soothe his shredded throat. The bassist collapsed on a couch, his fingers twitching and throbbing after working the fretboard for so long. Suddenly, the communicator crackled to life as another message came in from the Vuzerian ship. "Please respond. Your music is excruciating to our kind. We cannot bear it any longer." The band members looked at each other in confusion. Only then did they realize the full implications of their high-volume jam session traveling unimpeded through space. "Oh man," the guitarist said, his face falling. "I think we really messed up here." Captain Clark rushed onto the scene. "What's going on here? Are we under attack?" "No, sir," the bassist said sheepishly. "We were just playing some tunes while waiting to meet the aliens. We had no idea it was hurting them so badly." Clark rubbed his temples. "You boys might have just spoiled humanity's first contact with an alien species. What were you thinking?" He grabbed the communicator. "Vazarian vessel, this is Captain Clark of the human ship Righteous Pathfinder. Please accept our deepest apologies. We did not realize our music would cause such distress to your kind." A moment later, a relieved alien voice responded. "Communication acknowledged. We are unaccustomed to such ... intense auditory stimulation. Perhaps we should converse at a lower volume and frequency range." Captain Clark sighed. There was much work to be done in understanding each other's biology and bridging their differences. But at least now the deafening music had ceased, much to the aching relief of the Vuzarians. Back on Earth, the news of the heavy metal musical fiasco spread quickly. Famous DJ Scan D was particularly fascinated by the challenge of creating music that appealed to the Vuzarians' auditory senses instead of assaulting them. "Those poor aliens ain't never heard sounds like we pump out here on Earth," he said, leaning back in his studio chair. "We gotta find some way to translate our art for them." Scan D started flipping through his vast music library, listening to tracks with a new perspective. He analyzed the waveforms and frequency spectrums. Earth music was dominated by aggressive rhythms and loud guitars, designed to energize human ears and bodies. But the delicate Vuzarians needed something much softer. Slow, gentle whale song gave him inspiration. Scan D adjusted the pacing and tones, removing all spikes of volume. Long, sweeping notes flowed in serene waves like underwater currents. It was ambient, otherworldly music. Next, Scan D examined Tibetan singing bowl music recorded in his travels to monasteries in the Himalayas. The harmonic resonance sent calming vibrations through the body. But the sharp initial strikes were still too jarring. Scan D tweaked the reverberations, softening and sustaining them into a pleasant hum. The resulting track sounded meditative, carrying the listener lightly as if floating down a gentle river. But the music still needed something melodic to engage the mind. Scan D wove in notes from a Japanese koto, altering the plucked strings to remove all harsh attack and decay. Hypnotic patterns emerged, swirling and dancing around the central harmony. Delicate wind chimes were also sampled and digitally modified. Where before they clashed loudly in the breeze, now their tones blended into the mix with a subtle tinkling that put the mind at ease. After many failed attempts over weeks of effort, Scan D finally produced a track that flowed and ebbed delicately around the ideal frequency response for Vuzarian hearing. It was peaceful music tailored precisely for their auditory senses, with nothing overpowering or percussion-heavy. Back aboard the Vuzarian ship, the mood was tense. First Officer Xylux still shuddered thinking about the auditory trauma they had endured from human music. "How can we trust anything they send us now?" he said nervously. "For all we know, it could rupture our ear canals." But Captain Valix knew they couldn't give up on making meaningful contact. "We must have hope. Perhaps the humans have realized their mistake. Let us listen cautiously." When Earth DJ Scan D's custom track came through the ship's speakers, the Vuzarians braced themselves. But instead of a painful assault, they heard gentle, sweeping tones unlike any music of their world. It flowed around them like a soothing current, comforting and refreshing. Hesitantly, they removed their protective ear coverings. There were no piercing spikes of volume or intensity, just floating, dreamlike sounds and delicate, harmonic melodies. "It's beautiful," Xylux said in astonishment. The music calmed their minds and bodies. For the first time since encountering the humans, the Vuzerians felt at peace. Captain Valak nodded appreciatively. The humans have shown willingness to understand our ways. There is hope for true communication. On Earth, Scan D eagerly awaited the Vuzerian response to his custom track. When their message of gratitude came, he shouted victoriously, startling his studio assistants. "We did it, baby," Scan D said. "Now that's what I call first contact." His work was featured on global news outlets alongside headlines like "DJ Unites Worlds Through Music" and "Sound Diplomacy Soothes Alien Ears." But Scan D waved off the acclaim. "All that matters is we took a step together, human and alien alike. Music is the universal language if you know how to speak it." At the next interplanetary summit aboard the Righteous Pathfinder, Scan D's soothing music played gently in the background as humans and Vuzerians mingled and conversed. Without painful noise barriers dividing them, real connections flowered. The aliens described their home planet's tranquil soundscapes. The humans demonstrated instruments modified to fit Vuzerian hearing. Together, they explored new dimensions of musical expression. The humans gained profound insight into crafting their art for sensitive beings, and music once again proved its power to transcend biological differences and bring understanding between worlds. On the day of the historic first Interplanetary Music Festival, the crew of the Righteous Pathfinder was busy with final preparations. They had invited the most talented human and Vuzerian musicians to perform live collaborative compositions. Scan D checked the audio equipment modified to broadcast a range of frequencies pleasurable for both species. "All right, y'all, let's pump up the intergalactic unity." The Vuzerian performers were anxious as they tuned their traditional instruments. "I hope the humans enjoy our music," muttered Zentix, plucking his 12-stringed vilazon. "Just play from the heart," said the Vuzerian singer Valina. "Music transcends planets." As the first Vuzerian ensemble took the stage, the humans leaned forward eagerly. Soothing tones sung in alien tongues washed over the crowd, underlaid by gentle vilazon plucking. The music had a meditative quality, inspiring reflection on the bonds between all beings. When the Vuzerians finished, the hall rumbled with cheers and applause from both species. "My goodness, your music is stunning," said Captain Clark, with tears in his eyes. Next, a human guitarist named Willa performed her newly crafted space folk songs on a specially tuned acoustic guitar. The Vuzerians swayed pleasantly to the mellow, glittering melodies. "Beautiful, like a moonlit meteor shower back home," whispered Vuzerian Elder Nexum. More acts from both planets took the stage as the evening went on. A Vuzerian wind ensemble playing airy compositions on tube-like instruments. A human electronic musician using modulated binaural beats to stimulate brain activity. The musical exchange of ideas blossomed endlessly. For the finale, Scan D and Valina sang a duet they had composed together. Their contrasting vocal timbres wove together hypnotically over lush, synthesized harmonies. As the music faded, the crowd erupted in rapturous applause. "This is a new dawn for both our species," Captain Valak proclaimed. "Let the entire cosmos be moved by the power of music to unite worlds." As the festival ended, new friendships had been forged through sound. There was still much to learn, but in music both peoples found common ground. They realized that creativity could build bridges where words left gaps. Under the infinite stars, the future resonated with possibility. Human and Vuzerian dreamed together of composing symphonies that sang of life, joy, and the vast mysteries that bound sentient beings everywhere.